Welcome in to One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. I'm your host, John Barry, and it is Tuesday, meaning we are back with another college football predictions episode and our updated One of One Top 25 poll. Let's get into it. So our record on the season improved last week to 23-14. We need a bounce back week, and we got it going 4-1. The only game we missed on was Iowa State Cincinnati, but we got Miami, we got Alabama, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and now we have a big slate of games. You can see what we're predicting here. 7 games we're breaking down, and those last ones at the end will be a bit briefer, but stay tuned for it. I got some insightful things to say, I think, about those two Big 12 showdowns. Now, before we get started, if you guys are enjoying the college football content on the channel, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and now without further ado, one more thing. I'm not predicting Ohio State, Illinois. I know AP says it's a top 20 matchup, but I think just realistically, Ohio State is clearly out of Illinois league. And it felt like a weird game to predict because all I would be saying is Ohio State's much better. So if you're wondering why that game is not here, that is the explanation why. Now, without further ado, we can get started with Alabama, Missouri. All right, so the keys to the game, the first thing I want to talk about is the scheduling dynamics of this one. Because if you look at it, Missouri's going to be at home, always what you would like to have, right? An early home game, maybe you prefer it at night, but either way, you got a home game. It's going to be a good environment for you. You're also off a bye, so you have the rest advantage. And Alabama is coming off 2 difficult emotional victories. First, they went on the road to beat Georgia. Always difficult game when you're playing Georgia, and that's kind of like your big rival, you know. And then you had the revenge game against Vanderbilt. That was actually College Game Day. Who would have thought in the year 2025, Alabama-Vanderbilt would be College Game Day. Georgia-Alabama would not. But either way, 2 massive SEC games with emotional ties into them where Alabama played some really good football. But now you're asking them to get up for a 3rd game in a row against another really good team. Missouri's undefeated. And that team has baked in advantages in terms of them having better rest, so they're not going to be worn down, and having the home field. So you got to go on the road again and all that. It's just a difficult spot for Alabama, and it'll be really impressive if they win. Then getting to the actual schematics of the game, I think there's some clear edges for Missouri here, because if you look at where is Alabama vulnerable, so defensively they have a strong pass defense, but their run defense has not been very good. You look at what Florida State did to them, you look at what Georgia did to them, and even what Vanderbilt did to them, because Vanderbilt didn't have a crazy amount of yards, but the yards per carry was high, and then Georgia, who's a good run offense, about top 20, had over 200 yards, and then Florida State, who's been arguably the best run offense, had a great day. But Missouri is on the level of Florida State. When you look at yards per game, yards per rush, any of that, Missouri is arguably the best in the sport, definitely the best in the SEC at running the ball, and Ahmad Hardy has been maybe the best running back in all of college football. He leads the nation in rushing. So Missouri is perfectly built to exploit Alabama's run defense or lack of run defense. Then on the flip side, where's Alabama, weakest offensively? I know they had a little bit better with Jam Miller being their first 100-yard rushing back since 2023, but overall they've struggled to run the ball. Now you get Missouri, who has been, in terms of yards allowed per rush, maybe the best defense in all of college football, stopping the run. So Missouri's going to be able to run the ball. Alabama's not going to be able to run the ball. That should be a massive time of possession edge for Missouri. And yeah, when you have that clear of an advantage up front in terms of the run game, that's massive in any game. So that's why I say this Ty Simpson Heisman point, Alabama's going to have to throw it through the air. You're not going to beat Missouri running the ball. You're probably not going to stop Missouri's running the ball. And you're going to ask Ty Simpson, who has been phenomenal, who's been very accurate, who has weapons in Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, to do serious damage all day long through the air. And you're going up against a Missouri defense that, while its strength is in stopping the run, it's also a top 10 passing unit that's been one of the best at causing incompletions. Teams just aren't very efficient against Missouri, and they don't hit downfield shots. 2 things Alabama is going to be relying on. So I think Missouri is just there's an amalgamation here of being in the perfect spot to pull the upset and having the exact type of style that I think is a weakness for Alabama, to where I'm definitely taking the Missouri Tigers to win this game. I know Alabama's look great. I know everyone is high on them as of late, but this Missouri team has also been really good. They're also undefeated. I think they're being completely overlooked because of preseason expectations. Like I myself didn't expect Missouri to be, one of the teams you're considering as a top tier SEC team, and because of that, we haven't really taken notice of them. But this team is legit. They're good up front, and they have everything you need to beat Alabama, and I think they're doing it Saturday. Next up, we have the College Game Day location, and that is where two undefeated Big Ten teams are going to have a showdown. Indiana travels to Oregon. So the keys to the game here, right? We want to talk about Indiana scaling, mostly because of last year. Because what did Indiana do against inferior competition? Crushed them. What did they do even against somewhat similarly matched competition when they played Nebraska? Absolutely annihilated them. And then when they played Ohio State, when they played Notre Dame in the playoff, it just came to a screeching halt, right? Nothing looked the same. And I'm worried about that being the case again this year because, yes, you dominated inferior competition and even similar level competition in Illinois. But when the talent level cranks up to that other gear, which is what Oregon is, I'm concerned Indiana's not going to scale up to still be this explosive offense, still be this strong defense, and I'm a bit worried about that. Then I think the Oregon pass versus run defense difference is going to be huge here because Oregon's pass defense has been arguably the best in the country and definitely been the best in the Big Ten, which is important because Fernando Mendoza has been, balling, right? He's been great, right? Better than I think anyone expected him to be. The receivers, Surratt, Cooper have been good, and they've run the ball well. But I think they're going to have to rely more on that rushing element because just looking at this Oregon pass defense, I think they're going to hold up really well. I don't think Mendoza is going to have, the kind of games he's been having, especially when you factor in the pass rush he'll be dealing with a guy like Mateo Uiagalelei coming off the edge. I think Indiana's going to want to focus on the run, which is where Oregon has been more vulnerable. Northwestern exposed them a little bit. Penn State didn't expose them as much as I thought they could have, but they still ran the ball okay. And Indiana's been a really good run team. They've been a really balanced offensive attack. I think they may have to lean more into that run element, and then if that's working, that could open more where Oregon can't just tee off on Mendoza. You give him time, then even against the best pass defense, a quarterback as good as Mendoza with time and wide receivers as good as Indiana has can exploit them. On the Oregon side of things, though, I've talked about this in several episodes this year, how much I believe in this team. I think their offensive line is just not going to allow any pressure, and they haven't really at all. They've allowed, I think, the second lowest sack rate in the nation, right? So Indiana's not going to be able to pressure Dante Moore. He's going to have time, which means, yes, I know Indiana's getting D'Angelo Pons back, but if Dante Moore has time, Indiana is not covering these Oregon receivers. They're going to make big plays down the field. They're going to put up points, and I just don't think Indiana is going to be able to keep up with them, especially on the road in Autzen Stadium. It's going to be loud. It's going to be hostile, and Oregon's just got more talent in the better spot. Both teams are off a bye, so I do think you'll get close to a peak performance from both games. Neither should be tired or have a hangover game or be looking ahead or anything. Like, this is a spot where they should be able to give their best performance. And if Oregon's giving their best performance, there's not a team in the country right now I think I would pick to beat them. I know how good a team like Ohio State's looked. I know how good a team like Miami has looked. I'm saying if Oregon plays their A game right now, I think I'm picking them to beat anyone in the country, and that very much includes Indiana. So give me the Ducks to get the win at home. Another really big game, we get the Red River Shootout. This is a really stacked weekend for college football. And so, yes, Oklahoma, Texas, and this should be a defensive battle. On the Texas side, that O-line against Florida was really bad, and Arch Manning's pocket awareness wasn't the greatest. That could be a huge problem because what is Oklahoma's defense great at? Well, a number of things, actually, which we'll talk about in a second. But they are the second best sack rate team in the country and are second in the country in sacks. So they're going to wreak absolute havoc. Ask Jackson Arnold what they can do. So if Arch Manning's dropping back and this O-line can't hold up like they couldn't hold up against Florida, it could be a long day for the Texas offense. But, pressure rate's not the only thing Oklahoma's great at. They're also a top 5 run defense. They're also a top 5 pass defense. They're the number 1 yardage defense. They're the number 2 points defense. They have a case. They are the best defense in the country, and they prove that. Look at what they did to Michigan. Look at what they've done to Auburn. No one has been able to exploit them so far. And do I think a struggling Texas offense with a struggling quarterback in Arch Manning and a struggling O-line is going to be able to do that? Absolutely not. But Texas's defense is not bad either. At least we don't think so, right? Because they've been really good up until they played Florida, and that was a big concern to allow 29 points to a Florida offense that when they played Miami, when they played LSU, when they played South Florida, couldn't do anything. I know they were coming off a bye. I know Dallas Wilson, explosive wide receiver threat, made his debut for the season. So there was a little bit of a bump for Florida, but I did expect more from this Texas defense. And, they're really good. They're not Oklahoma level. Like, they're a top 12 run defense, a top 20 pass defense. And those numbers did take a hit from the Florida game, but they're still a top 5 points per game defense. So it should be really low scoring. It should be similar to the Oklahoma-Michigan game or the Oklahoma-Auburn game or the Texas-Ohio State game. Like, both these teams have already been in this kind of game. And it's been clear Oklahoma can win that style of game and has won that style of game. So that does favor Oklahoma. And then the other thing you got to talk about is if John Mateer is playing, which the reports today are is that like there's a decent chance he's going to be back in this game, then it's no question, because in a game where both defenses are going to do their thing, right, hold the other team, pretty much stagnant, it's going to come down to who can make like one or two key plays to get a big point, get some points on the board, and that's going to come down in a lot of ways to your quarterback. We saw him make run plays against Michigan. We saw him get the game-winning drive against Auburn. John Mateer can make that type of play. Arch Manning, I don't think, can make that play, and definitely hasn't shown any reason to make us think that he can. So if Mateer's there, the quarterback edge is so great, and Oklahoma's defense is still a little bit better, where it's a clear Oklahoma pick. But even if John Mateer is out, I'm still slightly leaning Oklahoma to win this game, just because they match up so well in terms of what has given Texas problem on that defensive front, and maybe it comes down to turnovers. I could see Arch Manning getting rushed, throwing interception, getting sacked, dropping the ball. Michael Hawkins, of course, can turn the ball over as well. We saw Red River last year. But overall, I think Oklahoma's defense is more prone to win them a game than Texas's defense is. And if John Mateer is not out, it's definitely going to come down to defenses making plays to win games. So I would take Oklahoma in that scenario. And then, if Mateer's healthy, it's an easy Oklahoma pick in my mind. And the Longhorns would lose their third game of the season, a team I picked to win the SEC. So that would be really something crazy to see at this preseason number 1 be 3-3. Man. All right, let's take a break from predictions to get into the 1 of 1 top 25. You can see who dropped out this week. Just talked about Texas. They're out of the rankings after losing to Florida. Penn State lose to UCLA. You're out of the rankings. So two teams that have been very disappointing. And then Mississippi State, it kind of just unraveled there at the end of the Texas A&M game. So they are out as well. Just hanging on, staying in is Florida State, who, yes, you got crushed by Miami. I know they only lost by 6, but you got crushed by Miami. But a lot of teams will get crushed by Miami this year. You still have one of the best wins in the Alabama win, so you're just hanging on. Just behind a team also from your state in South Florida who, like you, got crushed by Miami. Like I said, that'll happen to a lot of teams. But South Florida still has good wins at Boise, even though that got a little worse. But the Florida win looks a little bit better. So South Florida remains ranked. BYU undefeated enters for the first time. Look, I'm not the most impressed with this team when I watch them. West Virginia win, I don't know. It wasn't super impressive considering what West Virginia is missing. The Colorado win wasn't that impressive either. So I'm not completely sold on this team. But when you're 5-0 at this point in the season, you've earned a little bit of respect. 22, Iowa State. Look, you dropped. The Cincinnati win wasn't great. And when you combine that with the fact that you looked a lot worse defensively after the injuries, I start to wonder if this team, with those major losses in the secondary, is going to be able to look as good as they did earlier in the season. Then Georgia Tech 21 is really an interesting team because I was here in the preseason hyping up Georgia Tech. I was here in weeks 1 and 2 hyping up Georgia Tech, saying give them their respect. And now everyone is giving them their respect, and I'm like, well, hold on a second. We don't know if that Clemson win was really impressive at all. There was a banged-up Clemson team that hasn't been good, and you beat them off a walk-off field goal at home. I'm not sure that's that impressive. You beat Colorado by 7. A lot of teams have beaten Colorado. I don't know that that's impressive. You beat Wake Forest in overtime in a game you just point-blank should have lost. The refs handed you the game. That's on Georgia Tech's resume. So I don't really fully believe, actually definitely don't fully believe, but I'm very skeptical of this team at this point, much more than everyone else seems to be. So they're only at 21. At 20, I have the Arizona State Sun Devils, who were on a bye this week, but they just moved up as a product really of other teams losing. 19, I have Cincinnati. The Iowa State win was huge, and I'm really impressed with the Brendan Sorsby, what he did in the Kansas game as well. Basically, every game since week 1, Cincinnati's looked really strong offensively. They come in at 19 behind the team that beat them in week 1, Nebraska, because I respect head-to-head results. Nebraska beat Cincinnati, and since they've looked pretty good, Michigan, I know they barely lost, but it was a little bit more substantial than the final score showed. But the Michigan State win, decent win, and overall, Nebraska's just looked like a really solid team. And continuing the head-to-head thing here, Michigan ahead of them at 17. The Oklahoma loss is definitely nothing to be ashamed of, losing on the road to Oklahoma. But I would have liked to see a more impressive victory against a Wisconsin team on their third-string quarterback when you were at home and off a bye. So not the most impressive performance there, so I didn't move them too much higher than they have been in previous weeks. And then Notre Dame at 16. Look, I get that they have 2 losses. They're the only 2-loss team I have this high, or I should say they're the highest 2-loss team I have, because Florida State's down there at 25. But when your 2 losses are to teams yet to be revealed, who are going to be quite high, high in my poll, high in pretty much everybody's poll, by a total of 4 points, I mean, what are we doing, right? I think we want teams to play these big games. I want to see Notre Dame play Miami, and Notre Dame play Texas A&M, and Ohio State play Texas, and all these big matchups, right? But if we do that, we can't punish you too much for losing a really competitive, great game against another great team. So you have a winning record. You beat Purdue. You've beaten Boise, who's a decent team. You annihilated Arkansas in a way another top team like Ole Miss did not. So I think this Notre Dame team is really strong. I think they're better than the 16th best team in the country. And as these wins keep coming, they will continue to move up as the record starts to reflect that. At 15, we have the LSU Tigers, who have been one of those teams where you've relied on defense to win games, and the resume, isn't as strong as it seemed early in the year with the Clemson win, obviously taking major hits. The Florida win for the first time all year, actually looks a little bit better, right? As that had just been getting worse and worse. But like I said, a road loss to Ole Miss, that's not a bad loss. You weren't particularly competitive, which is a little bit concerning. And the score was definitely closer than what it should have been. But LSU still has one of the better defenses in the country, and that gets you at least fairly high when you have I know the offense hasn't been great, but at least competence offensively. Virginia, a team I definitely did not expect to be this high coming into the year, comes in at 14 because I was really impressed because I'd give them credit for the Florida State winning that, but I'd kind of chalked it up to like trap game, good spot, and now you're going to have the emotional letdown on the road at Louisville. But no, you get 2 defensive touchdowns. The defense looks much improved, probably its best performance it's had all year. And if Chandler Morris is healthy, we know how good the offense can be. So if they're starting to play complementary football, Virginia could actually be dangerous in terms of making a run to the ACC title game. They come in at 14 behind the Vanderbilt Commodores. This is college football in 2025, where Virginia and Vanderbilt are both in your top 15. Did you ever see that one coming? But Vanderbilt, I'm not going to punish them too much for the Alabama game. Alabama scored a late touchdown, and at least for large swaths of that game, Vanderbilt was outplaying Alabama until, the back-breaking end of half touchdown, and that kind of led to the Alabama comeback where Alabama started to outplay Vandy. Diego Pavia played probably definitely his worst game of the season with the 2 turnovers. He'll be better, though. This Vandy team, still really quality team. Tennessee then ahead of them. The offense has been amazing. They have the Mississippi State win, which is solid. The Syracuse win is solid because Syracuse was better than they are now because Steve Angeli was still healthy. And yeah, you lost an overtime game to Georgia, which you easily could have won. And Georgia comes in at 11. So you were right there with Georgia. Georgia gets head-to-head, though, a little bit better. Look, Georgia is a really talented team, really well-coached team, but they do have limitations offensively. The passing game's not as strong as you hoped it would be, and the pass rush defensively isn't particularly strong. And if those things improve, then maybe they could elevate into being a top-level team in college football this year. So that's 11 through 25. We will unveil the top 10 at the end of the show, but for now, let's get back into the predictions. So, Michigan's traveling to USC to take on the Trojans. And I think the key talking points of this one are pretty obvious. What has USC's weakness been, not only this year, but, under Lincoln Riley's whole tenure? You would say, defense, but then overall, physicality. What is Michigan going to bring? Physicality. How do we know that? They're a top 5 run offense. They're a top 5 run defense, right? That just screams physicality. And what was USC's problem in their one loss this year? Illinois move the ball at will and really push them around on the lines of scrimmage. Michigan is like, yes, that's what we would love to do. Even if they're maybe not as good as past Michigan teams like the J.J. McCarthy teams that won the national title, they're still plenty good enough to do it to USC. So the Michigan physicality edge is massive. But then the USC has the firepower to keep up. Like, even if they're allowing a bunch of points, USC is now the number one scoring offense in the country. And Jaden Maeva, I know he's lost a game at this point to Illinois, but he still played really well in that game and has an argument that he's been one of the top 5 to 10 best quarterbacks in the country. I think ESPN ranked him number 1 in a list last week. So yeah, he's been really strong. The run game has taken a hit from early in the season, but it's still a good run game, and Waymon Jordan is still a good back. And Malachi Lemon has obviously been one of the top 5 receivers in the country. He's been amazing. So they have the firepower to put up points on this Michigan defense, and with when you have that, you're not going to get blown out. But when Michigan has the time of control edge, which I expect them to have, and can wear on you over the course of a game, then, eventually Michigan will get a stop. Eventually Jaden Maeva may make a mistake, and you can only play keep up for so long. So the defensive line at USC is going to have to make a major statement this week to beat Michigan, in my opinion. The other thing to think about here, though, is Michigan going to is it going to be 5 yards, 6 yards, and what's the word? Long sustained drives down the field? I'm thinking of a different word, but I can't remember, but it's fine. Or is it going to be 5 yards, oh, Justin Haynes breaks 160 yards? Because then the defense isn't on the field that long, and the time of possession isn't that long, and Justin Haynes is definitely going to try to break these runs. So that's the key thing, is Michigan going to have long drives, or are they going to be these really explosive runs that gets USC's offense back on the field and keeps the time of possession not as more balanced? Because I think the best thing Michigan can do here is keep USC's offense off the field, keep their defense on the field. If they do that, I think they win this game. I think they know that. I think they'll have a game plan that will execute to get that done, and for those reasons, I am taking the Michigan Wolverines to win on the road against the Trojans. Next up, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. The Georgia Bulldogs take on the Auburn Tigers. And at first, I wasn't even planning on predicting this game. When I saw next week's schedule, I was like, yeah, Georgia, Auburn. Georgia will probably be clear favorite. I'll pick Georgia. And that'll be it. And then I saw the spread, and I was like, oh, it's only 3-point spread. Maybe there's more to this than I initially thought. And then when I dug into it, I'm like, oh, there definitely is. And because at first I was like, Georgia, Auburn, I'm sure Jackson Arnold's already been sacked 5 times. He might be being sacked right now as I'm talking about this, And then you get into it, and it's like, oh, no, Georgia's pass rush, I knew they weren't generating a ton of sacks, but they're one of the bottom, I think, 15 teams in the country in terms of generating sacks, right? So Auburn's biggest weakness, the main concern I had for them, that's already gone. And when you look at what Auburn, or the reasons Auburn has lost, because they played 3 good teams. You played Baylor, you played A&M, you played Oklahoma. Oklahoma and Texas A&M, both top 10 pressure rate teams, right? Or sack rate teams. Now, part of that is because they got to play Auburn, which boosts your numbers, but you get the point, right? You play those teams. Jackson Arnold's getting sacked 10 times the Oklahoma game. I forget if it was 5 or 7 against A&M, but sacked a bunch, killing drives, right? You play Baylor, which is still a good team, but is in the 80s of sack rate. So you have time back there, and Jackson Arnold can make plays with his legs, and things can develop. And now this Auburn offense puts up 38 points and can go win a game. So Jackson Arnold should have time to stand back in the pocket, and that'll allow him to do more things scrambling and make more plays down the field. And that'll be important because both these teams have good defenses, but the strength of them is both in the defensive front. So Auburn against Oklahoma, they could completely stop the run, and then Oklahoma wasn't making a ton of plays through the air. Similar thing with A&M, right? So it starts up front for Auburn. If they are going to be exploited, it's going to be more so through the air. Baylor was able to do that. The other teams they played have not. So their pass defense isn't bad by any means, right? Like A&M has weapons and still couldn't do it. But if you're going to beat Auburn, it's likely going to be through the air. Is Georgia capable of that? Yes, we've seen what they did against Tennessee, but we've also seen the struggles they can have at times, and maybe the receivers aren't the most reliable. And I think on the flip side, it's exactly the same type of story. Georgia's run defense is the strength of the team, but the pass defense can be vulnerable at times. We saw what Tennessee did. We saw what Alabama did. Difference here being, though, Tennessee and Alabama are two of the most prolific passing attacks in the sport. Auburn, while they have some of the most prolific weapons in the sport, is definitely not one of the best passing attacks. So when it comes down to this, usually you don't want to just say, oh, it's which QB do you think can deliver? But when it's team specifically built to stop the run and it's going to come down to making plays through the air, do I think Gunnar Stockton's going to make those plays, or do I think Jackson Arnold's going to make those plays? And look, from what I've seen this year, you got to go Gunnar Stockton. It doesn't matter what you thought coming in the year, how talented Jackson Arnold might be. I've seen what Gunnar Stockton can do. And I know the numbers against Alabama weren't great, but he still made that pass down the field. The receiver just dropped to give him the lead. And we all saw what he did at Tennessee, tying up the game at 38. So Gunnar Stockton is someone who has shown that he can step up in a big moment and make you a play. Jackson Arnold really has not, and he's had opportunities at the end of the games to do something, and instead it ends with him on the ground being sacked and Auburn turning the ball over on downs. That's just how Auburn loses football games. So when it comes down to it, which quarterback's going to deliver a big play for their team and what I expect to be a low-score game, give me Gunnar Stockton and the Georgia Bulldogs to win this one on the road. Finally, we have a special two-part prediction. Both should be briefer, but it's just as these are really big games for the Big 12 that I think are being overlooked, and I wanted to go through them really quickly. First off, ASU travels to Utah, Rice-Eccles Stadium at night. Really tough place to play. But and Utah is a team that I've talked about in the Big 12 that they're going to be really good, and people kind of, basically they're out of their mind because of what Texas Tech did to them. But I was like, Texas Tech is a unique situation because they had elite defensive line talent, something you don't often see in the Big 12, and Utah will be able to, kind of push around the rest of the Big 12. The one other team in the conference you might not be able to do that to is ASU because of how good they've been stopping the run and how good they've been at generating pressure on the quarterback. Because Utah's strength, they don't allow sacks and they bully you up front. If ASU can withstand that, then you've got a ball game, and they force turnovers, and Sam Leavitt makes plays with his legs, and Jordan Tyson's explosive, right? And then you get ASU potentially pulling off the upset win here. Do I think they do it? No, because Utah at night in that environment is an environment I expect Sam Leavitt to struggle in. You saw what Mississippi State did to ASU, and I don't think they'll be able to run the ball. I think they'll run it okay on Utah. I don't think they'll run it great on Utah, so I think Sam Leavitt will have to make plays with his arms, which up to this point in the season he hasn't really done. It's been a bit disappointing. So while I think ASU is competitive for sure, I would pick Utah to win this game. Then Arizona BYU is another one of these defensive battles. Both have been like top 15 defenses in the sport, and Arizona particularly has been really strong stopping the run. So Blair Bachmeier is going to have to again prove with his arm that he can beat a good team on the road in conference play. This game's really tight spread. I think it's like 1.5. And I like U of A better in this game. The key here is, though, BYU forces a lot of interceptions, and Fafita has turned the ball over. So if Fafita makes the mistakes, that's how you lose this game, is BYU's defense getting a couple of picks. I'm trusting him to protect the ball. If they do that, Arizona, I think, is good enough in the trenches to match BYU, and I think BYU goes down, leaving Texas Tech as the only undefeated team left in the Big 12. So that wraps up all of our predictions. But before we get out of here, let's unveil my final top 10 teams for the week. 10 through 6, right? 10 is Missouri, 9 is Alabama. These are two teams that are going to play this week. I went Alabama higher because although they have the loss to Florida State, the wins are a lot better. The Georgia win, the Vanderbilt win, those were both teams I had in the top 15. Missouri doesn't have a win of that caliber. They could get one this week, but that explains that. Indiana ahead because Illinois, though I didn't rank them, they were right on the fence of being ranked for me, and you beat them by like 53. So it was just so dominant, and you looked so good, dominating all the inferior competition, that I think you earn the right to be ahead of Alabama. Oklahoma, look, John Mateer, even if he's not back, I think that's irrelevant, right? It's about what have you done on the field. You've played one game without him. You were dominant. I know it's Kent State, but that's all that matters right now. I'm not predicting what Oklahoma would be without John Mateer, and he might already be back. Who knows? But yeah, the resume speaks for itself with wins over Michigan and Auburn. And then Ole Miss drops one spot from last week to 6, but it was really just about a team jumping them. They're on a bye, or they're not on a bye. I think they were on a bye last week. But so they just fall down one spot. Into the top 5, at number 5, I have Texas A&M, who in the first half against Mississippi State, I was beginning to be concerned, like, was the offense performance against Notre Dame a mirage? But then they came alive, and the run game is really, really strong. They have multiple running backs who can hurt you. Marcel Reed can make plays with his legs, and the receiver weapons in Concepcion and Mario Craver are really dangerous. They're almost the best team in Texas, but Texas Tech, man, this defense is crazy. It's not the best in the country, although ESPN's stop rate statistic, they actually are the best according to that. So they are stopping their opponents more often than anyone else. So they are truly an elite defense. The linebackers fly around. With Rodriguez, the defensive line talent is great. And then passing wise, Baron Morton slings it all around the yard. They just look so, so good. They are clearly a tier above everyone else in the Big 12. And just for the record, like, this is for another time, the gap's only getting bigger. Like, with their financial investment, you saw the recruiting news over the weekend with the guys they're signing. They're going to sign more 5-star recruits like in the next 2 years than maybe the rest of the Big 12 combined. They're going to dominate the transfer portal. They are quickly building like a little powerhouse out in Lubbock, Texas. I just so you guys know. And then the top three, it's everybody's top three in various orders, right? But I'm going Oregon 3. They dropped down from 1 because of the bye, but that's just how narrow these margins are. Like, they beat Indiana, they could jump right back up. These teams are so close in my mind that just taking the week off while these other two teams built up their resume, that's going to drop you because Miami got a really good win, dominant for 3 quarters over Florida State. Would have been number 1 if not for that fourth quarter. But like I said, the margins are tight. You slip up in the fourth, and when Ohio State's giving a masterclass defensive performance, winning 42-3 against Minnesota, that's enough for them to move ahead of you. But yeah, so Miami, I would say Ohio State and Oregon have more opportunities to keep building a resume than Miami does because Miami's schedule the rest of the way is pretty weak. But yeah, these 3 teams have quickly emerged as tier 1 in college football. I said it last week, I'll say it again this week. I fully expect the national title winner to come from these 3 teams. My pick is Oregon personally, but these 3 teams are the best. With that being said, that is all we have for this week's episode. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Who do you have winning these big college football games this week? What game are you most looking forward to? And maybe give me your top 5 or top 10 ranking for this week's poll. Until next time.